back. And today I have my special guest, co-founder and chief purpose officer at Purpose U, co-founder Blueprint Business Architecture, and life gets better with purpose. None other than Mr. Ian Chamandy.
Thank you, Daniel.
Welcome back to one of my podcasts, Mr. Ian. And can you please introduce more about yourself? That's
Sure. So I is the music going to be playing? Oh,
no,
sorry.
just only the
It's
intro.
just a little distracting. Excuse me. Well, I co-created a business about 20 years ago with a partner who sadly died during COVID. But that business was predicated on the idea that the single most important strategic asset that any company has. Usually if I ask companies what their most important strategic asset is, they'll say their people. And it's like, well, yeah, no, I get why you would do that answer, but people come and go. Even in businesses that have great retention, people come and go. So the single biggest strategic asset that any company has is knowing the one thing at their essence, at the heart of the company, that makes it uniquely remarkable. And so we started with that fundamental belief, and we created a three-part process for creating a master blueprint for an organization, and that can be a company or a not-for-profit or a charity, but for creating a master blueprint for an organization that creates a clear, concise, and compelling future for it that everybody understands, that inspires everybody, and that they all buy into. And so that's what we set out to do, and that's what Blueprint is all about: is creating a master blueprint for an organization that creates a clear, concise, and compelling future. And the creation of that master blueprint starts with identifying the one thing at your heart that makes you uniquely remarkable.
Very well said, Mr. Ian, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Thank you for that blueprint
Thank
indeed.
you, thank you, thank you.
So today, let's talk about helping over 400 CEOs transition from traditional management to the focus itself. So, Mr. Ian, you help over 400 CEOs make this transition. What is the common thread, the moment, or realization that brings traditionally managed CEO to your door? Ready to talk about purpose.
Okay, that's an excellent question. So typically, the CEO is entrepreneurial, and that's not necessarily an entrepreneur, right? You can be a senior executive or even a CEO in a Fortune 500 company and still have an entrepreneurial attitude. So, usually, the people who are looking to do a blueprint are those who are entrepreneurial and they feel like they're missing something, like they're leaving something on the table, like there's something they can't see. They know there's more, but they can't see what it is. And that's what this process does. Is um, it helps to reveal the full value of the organization so that the CEO and the senior executive team knows exactly what business their company is in. Now, that may sound a little weird because I'll give you an example. There was a CEO came to us, and he was the second generation CEO of a retail shelving company, right? So Home Depot builds a box, they go in, they put up all the rack shelving, and when they're done, the store opens. And so what was the point that I was trying to make about? Oh, so John says, I'm having breakfast with him, and he says, I know there's a magic to my business. So remember, I said the CEO, the entrepreneurial CEO, knows there's something more, knows that they don't have the full picture. So he said, I know there's a magic to my business, but every time I open my mouth to talk about it, it sounds so generic, so banal, so like, anything that my competitors are doing. And I said to him, John, it's because you don't know what business you're really in. And he said, to his credit, he said, you're right. I don't know what business I'm really in. Now, John knew that he played in the category of retail shelving, but he didn't know what unique place in that sandbox, in the retail shelving sandbox. He didn't know what place was uniquely his own. So he decided to do a blueprint. And when we do a blueprint, it's the CEO and three or four of his or her, senior management team. And it's a facilitated discussion. It's 10 sessions of 2 hours each on Zoom. And at the beginning of that conversation, I just get them to talk and talk about the business. Tell me about your business. How do you see your business? Blah, 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 blah. But eventually something comes into focus. And where the conversation got interesting with this company was when they started talking about how they had been in business for 3 generations, right? Not 3 decades, 3 generations. And his son was the third generation. And because of that longevity, they had developed techniques and processes and systems and procedures that allowed them to get finished significantly faster. So you can imagine if they got a Home Depot done a month faster than their competitors, the store opens a month sooner, and that's a month of retail sales that Home Depot was not anticipating. And that's like about $2 million a week, as I understand it. So, like $8 to $10 million of unanticipated revenue is pretty darn good. So, as we're having this conversation about getting finished faster, one of his VPs says, and he just says this as a joke, he says, on our signs where it says opening soon, I want ours to say opening sooner. And I just went, that is brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant. That is what this company had all their focus geared on. They couldn't tell you that because they didn't know. But now they know. The full value that they bring is not getting finished faster. I mean, it is, but it's the benefit that the company opens sooner, the store opens sooner and gets revenue that it didn't realize. So, opening sooner, just 2 words, that became the expression of what made this organization uniquely remarkable. And when that what your company is committed to is opening sooner, then there are two very important and valuable things you can do. You can look at how you're operating your business. You can look at all the parts individually and you can say, is this part really dedicated to opening sooner? And if the answer is yes, that's great. You don't touch it. But if the answer is no, you say, how do we have to shift this part in order to get it aligned with opening sooner? And I'll give you a very obvious one, right? Looking at the parts of the business, one part is marketing and sales. Well, how do those have to shift? You need to flow the new story around opening sooner into all of your marketing and sales and digital um, communications vehicles, uh, so that all of what you're saying is a reflection of the one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable, which is opening sooner. So that's one of the important things you do. You look at all the parts of the business and you take the ones that are not aligned with opening sooner and you figure out what you need to do, how you need to shift those. So you get them all aligned with opening sooner, and they're all working in lockstep towards a common goal, which is opening sooner. And then the second thing you can do is you can look at all of your communications, your marketing, your sales, your board communications, your employee communications, all that stuff. And you can say, how are we going to use opening sooner to guide our messaging so that all messaging, no matter where it's coming from, it could be a mundane email or it could be a blockbuster advertising campaign, but it all reflects opening sooner. So that's how it works. Come up, and I'm talking about the blueprint process now. We first have to figure out that 7 words or less that describes what makes you uniquely remarkable. Use it to design how you're going to operate and use it to design how you're going to communicate. So, those two things, all the stuff you do and all the stuff you say, are always aligned with and reflective of the one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable. So that's how the blueprint process works.
Very well said, Mr. Ian. You started your career in media and branding before moving into purpose work. What did you see in a boardroom that convinced you purpose was not just a nice to have, but a fundamental business advantage?
Okay, I'm going to answer your question, and you might have to remind me what the question is, but I have to explain other thing first, in order to answer your question. So
Please
I've
go
been
ahead.
talking about the one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable and defining that in 7 words or less. And you asked me about purpose and what's the connection between the two? Well, here's the connection. Um, Pablo Picasso, the famous artist, has a famous quote. And he said, the meaning of life is to find your gift, and your purpose is to share it with the world. Now, what he's basically saying is figure out who the best possible you is and share that with the world. And if you buy that, then you got to figure out who the best possible you is, identify the one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable. But then if you buy into what Picasso says, and I certainly do, it then becomes not your purpose is to find your gift and share it with the world. Your purpose is to find the one thing that makes you uniquely remarkable at the core of your company and share that with the world because that's your gift. So that's why purpose, your 7 words or less that describes what makes you uniquely remarkable, is your purpose because it describes the best possible you. Opening sooner, right? So then now you have to remind me of the question. Purpose, right? What did I see in the boardroom that made me
Yes.
realize? Okay, so here's the thing. It's not great question. Boardroom's important, but it's not just the boardroom. It's the boardroom, it's the senior leadership team, it's all your employees, it's all your investors, it's your regulators, it's everybody. The problem exists everywhere, and that is no two people have the same idea of what this company is or where it's going. Sure, there's a business plan, but that's just the nuts and bolts of how you're going to operate. Where is this company going? You know, and when you express where it's going, is it exciting? Right? First, is it relevant? Is it aligned with your talents as an organization? But also, is it an inspiring place? So think about again the retail shelving company. That's a lot of people with hammers and screwdrivers and drills and stuff like that. And they could have been committed to, you know we we're really good at putting up real shelving, but no, what they're committed to is, and what everybody associated with this company, the senior executives, the CEO, the employees, the board, everybody knows, is that this company is all about opening sooner. And so everything it does and says has to be aligned with opening sooner. Now, when you go to the board as the CEO and you say, here are some things that we are going to implement, here are some things that we're going to invest in order to, be even more about opening sooner. And then the board can sit there and say, well, we all agree with you that this company is about opening sooner. Now what we can do is we can evaluate each of those initiatives rather than just saying, is it a good initiative? No, there's a higher standard than that. It's not just, is it a good initiative, but is it aligned with opening sooner? Is it going to push opening sooner forward more? And because you're all aligned on opening sooner, you can have this conversation where everybody has the same understanding about what the company is and where it's going, and then they can use the same language and understanding to have a debate about whether this is an appropriate initiative. But that's a much more focused conversation. Is this aligned with our purpose than just, is this a good initiative that we should do? I'll give you an example. So the CN Tower, which for a bunch of decades was the tallest building in the world. It's in downtown Toronto, and it's about a quarter of a mile high.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was considering doing this thing called edge walk, which means that you have people walking around outside on the roof of the CN Tower, 1,200 feet above the ground. Crazy. Now, you're wearing a special suit, you're wearing a special harness, you're double or triple strapped in. There's no way you can fall. But what you can do is you can walk around up there and you can lean over, at a 45-degree angle, and you can do all this crazy stuff to scare the living daylights out of you. Before the CN Tower did the blueprint, they were trying to sell this to the board, and because it was an expensive investment. And then they did their blueprint, and their 7 words or less were raising to a higher level. And the reason for that was because everything at the CN Tower happened 1,200 feet above the ground, and it being 1,200 feet above the ground made it better, right? There's a rotating restaurant up there. You can go to a restaurant. There are thousands of restaurants in Toronto. You can go to any restaurant. There's only one restaurant you can go that can raise the restaurant experience to a higher level by actually being 1,200 feet off the ground. Now, one of the things that they also had at the base level was they had an arcade room and they had a mini putt. And we had to ask the question, is the arcade room experience enhanced by the height of the CN Tower? No, it wasn't. They had to get rid of the arcade room. Is the mini putt enhanced by the height of the CN Tower? No, it's not. So they had to get rid of that. But they brought in other stuff that did get elevated by the height of the CN Tower, including, meteorological programs, geographic programs where you're doing stuff looking down from way up there, lots of weather stuff, lots of aviation stuff. So there's all this other stuff that they brought in that was more aligned with, how does being at 1,200 feet elevate this experience? So when they did that, when they did the blueprint, they went back to the board and they said, this is an iconic example of what we're all about, which is raising an experience to a higher level. And the board said, yeah, I get that. I get that. Okay, we approve. Invest in that. And now it's like, I don't know, 10 years later, and there have been thousands and thousands of, what I consider fools who have done that. No way would I ever do it. But it's one of the most iconic tourist experiences in Toronto. And it was all justified to the board, and the money to invest in it was approved by the board because the board saw that it was a very powerful expression of the CN Tower's purpose, which is elevating to a higher level.
Very well said. Sir Ian, you've been doing this work for 20 years. How has your understanding of purpose evolved over those 2 decades? What do you believe now that you didn't when you started?
I think just first of all, my belief in this, because I've done this, maybe around 500 times with various companies and not for profits and charities and startups. I've had so much experience doing it, and people are so excited because they feel like for the first time they know what business they're leading, and they feel like the veil lifts and the fog clears, and it's such a relief. So it's the validation of doing it over and over again, knowing that everybody does have a purpose statement that can be expressed in 7 words or less, that is clear, concise, and compelling, just like opening sooner. But the other thing I learned, I got a deeper understanding of purpose. And one of the most powerful, deeper understandings of purpose I got is what its component parts are, right? Just like an atom has component parts, electrons, neutrons, positrons, all that stuff, purpose has component parts as well. And those component parts fall into 3 buckets: your beliefs, your wants, and your talents. So, as an organization, you have your beliefs, right? The principles that guide the organization. You have your wants, where you're going and what you're trying to achieve. And then you have your talents. What's your skill set as an organization? And every organization's unique combination of beliefs, wants, and talents is is what makes them uniquely remarkable. It's like no two snowflakes are alike. So here's why that's important in knowing what the component parts are. Because when you post blueprint, sorry, pre-blueprint, your decision making was, is this a good idea that we're contemplating? And that's a very broad question. Post blueprint, your question is going to be, is this idea that we're contemplating aligned with our purpose? That's a much narrower question, but at the same time, a much easier question to answer. Now, when you say, yes, this idea is aligned with my purpose, what you're really saying is it's aligned with my beliefs, my wants, and my talents. And that's why it feels so right. That's why it is so logical that it's self-evident, right? Opening sooner. And that it resonates on a deep emotional level. If you're the VP of construction at Home Depot, and the 2 things that give you gray hair are staying on budget and staying on time, when the company that's responsible for you staying on time says, hey, we're going to get done a month sooner, you're like, oh, tell me more, right? It resonates in the right setting. And so that's why opening sooner worked for the retail shelving company so well. Because when they said we're making decisions that are aligned with our purpose, they're really saying they're making decisions that are aligned with our beliefs, wants, and talents, which is like the root of who you are.
We wrap up our discussion for today. I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in 6th season. Abstract poetry in a 3rd season, and of course, my book 101 review in 6th season too. A comedy 101 4th season, and my food 101 in 6th season as well. Geography 101, love letters, movie 101 review, music 101 in its 5th season, science 101, sex 101 in 4th season, and my baby podcast, trivia 101, motivation 101, Spiritual Awakening 101, Entrepreneurship 101, Law 101, Mental Health 101, Coaching 101, of course, my Bible verses 101. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Ian, if a CEO is listening right now and feels stuck in traditional management, focus on metrics and targets, but sensing something is missing, what is the first question they should ask themselves tomorrow morning to begin this journey?
Okay, that's a great question, Daniel. But first, I've got to say, I am exhausted thinking about all of the podcasts you do. You're a busy man. So,
Busy
a lot of
indeed.
times when we're about to start a blueprint, the company says, how do we prepare? What do we do? And I say, look, there's one question you need to consider. And the question is far more profound than it appears on the surface. The question is, if everything you do is a means to an end, what's the end purpose? Because and the reason it's so profound is that most companies think the things that they do, making sporting apparel like Nike is their purpose. But no, those are all the expressions of your purpose. So if everything that you do and say is a means to an end, what is the end purpose? It makes them think one level higher.
Well, very well said, Mr. Ian. So can you please invite our listeners to support your business, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Thank you. Yeah, we're at 7 words.biz.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Ian Chamandy, because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering business like this to rise. So, Mr. Ian, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure, Daniel. Thank you very much.
Maricam people, see you soon.